Hey, Alyssa.
Hey, Sam.
How are you?
I'm good. My body hurts, but I'm good.
Well, I mean, can't win them all. Are you otherwise ready?
I am ready.
Okay, great. Would you like to intro today's episode?
I would love to intro today's episode. So I'm going to read a comment from our cohabitating episode.
Okay.
Which a lot of people were actually like questioning me if cohabitating was actually a word.
Let's just start with this.
And I looked it up many a time, and it is. And then I asked my mom, and she looked it up in the dictionary. But I mean, if it's not, I'm very sorry. But I think it is.
Maybe that's a Canadian American thing.
I don't know, because it can be like cohabiting, but it's like cohabitation. I don't know.
Okay.
Anyway, that was a sidebar. So this comment actually, like, the first time that I read it, I was just kind of disappointed because it just felt like we were disappointing other people. But then once I actually like started to think about it, I was like, I just don't know how I feel about this. So anyway, I'm going to read this comment. So I'm going to delete this comment also after. So don't go looking for it because we're not trying to like start shit. You know what I mean? We just thought we'd have a conversation about it. So the comment says, very interesting, but I wish you guys did touch on the harder to talk about topics when it comes to living with a partner. Stuff like how attraction changes when living with them, ... Like your sex life change after you live together. Did it get better? Did it get worse? I felt like a lot of the stuff you guys talked about here was pretty surface level. And then they said, but anyway, I still enjoy listening, and she loves turning it on, like when she's getting ready for work and makeup. And this comment got 149 likes, and it's the top comment on that episode. So here's how I felt about it. Is that it's okay. So the basis of this episode is going to be about oversharing. And I like how I'm talking to you as if you don't know.
Okay, Sam, let me break this down for you.
Yeah. But it just made me disappointed because the amount that we open up on this podcast and in general on social media is crazy. And when I was talking to Sam about this the first time that I read this comment, I was like, with this podcast, we're really like grateful and we're really lucky that we get so many views, or the amount of views that we do. But when I look at that comment, it's like, imagine getting up in front of a room of 80,000, 100,000 people and talking about your sexual experiences.
Yeah.
And in depth, because I mean, I don't want to add to the comment because I can't know what that person was, thinking, but I can only assume that they want the nitty gritty.
Yeah.
Because I mean, that is what we're trying to do on the podcast, but we also have to be careful about ourselves and what we're comfortable sharing. I still have my mom, grandparents, a brother, I still have professional people in my life that I want to work with. And I don't think that there's anything wrong about talking about sex or, whatever else might be a little bit more personal. I do think that there's too much stigma around sex and stuff like that, but that also doesn't mean that I'm not uncomfortable talking about it at length, and not to mention the privacy of my partners.
Yeah.
Because there are people who know who my partners were and could probably link, some of the things. And I only had one long-term partner that I lived with, which I said in that episode. And so what am I going to do? Go spread our sex life all over the internet? I don't think that that's fair, personally. Yeah. So anyway, that's my like encompassing feeling about that specific comment. But we wanted to kind of like have an episode where we talk about the age of oversharing.
So I think the thing that's interesting to me, like listening to you talk about that and just comparing to what's said online a lot of the time, is I find that so often people are kind of talking down about people that overshare. Like it's sort of like this thing to make fun of, and it's seen as like being really like narcissistic and like, oh, that's our generation, we overshare, whatever. And I think that people particularly talk down about women in that conversation. And so it's kind of this catch-22, like so many expectations that are put on women, like where, people are putting us down for oversharing while also demanding to know more. And I think now in the age that we're in at this time, people want transparency. They want to know what's going on. They want to know what companies are doing with their money. They want to know what's going on behind the scenes. They want to know how things are made. They want to know what's going into their products. Like they want to know so much about everything around them. And so I think it's kind of like this weird catch-22 because it's like everybody wants transparency. That's what we're all asking for. But then when someone kind of like steps forward and is like, well, this is my story, a lot of the times people are kind of like brought down for it. And it's such a weird like juxtaposition between these two sides. But what I wanted to ask you to kind of like start this off is, overall, do you think that like oversharing is a good thing or a bad thing?
I guess it's like more complicated than like a yes or no question for me, which is good because we have a podcast. But I think that sharing is really powerful. And I know that because for a lot of my life, as you guys know, if you've watched the podcast for a while, I didn't share at all. And like people, even like Sam, really didn't know who I was. Like they hung out with me all the time and stuff like that, but I didn't give any part of myself or like my life to those people. And it was a really lonely existence, and it created a lot of like burden on me emotionally. And so I think that there is a big benefit to sharing and feeling like you're not the only one. I think that that's what like oversharing, I guess, has kind of done. It's opened the door for us to feel like, oh, hey, I have that too, or whatever, you know what I mean? And so I think that there's a positive to it, but I think that there's also the danger that people could overshare when they're not ready. And if those negative comments come in, which they will come in, and you weren't actually prepared to share that story and you were just doing it to either like appease or for views or something like that, I don't know, that can also be very detrimental. And that's, in my opinion, like an even bigger burden to carry, because if you're not ready to like deal with that criticism, and you can say as many times as you want, like, those people don't know you, and like it hurts, you know, it hurts just as bad.
Well, and I think that it's even if you are ready to share some things, that doesn't mean that they're suddenly no longer sensitive. And so, you know, there's some things that like we talk about on here even that I don't really want that to be ammunition for a commenter. But it's I'm just kind of like on both sides of the fence with it, because or I'm on the fence rather. Yeah.
I'm standing on both sides.
Because I agree. Like, I think that sharing is really important, and I do think it's like very helpful. And from past generations, like we've talked about before, it's like, you know, it was something people didn't talk about certain things. They didn't talk about, you know, their feelings, their thoughts, what they were going through. Like, everything was very like shrouded, and I think that that didn't serve anybody.
No, yeah.
And so I think that in a way, you know, sharing really does bring people together, and it makes people feel less alone. And also it can kind of help you with your problems before they become so prolonged. And I was talking to Matt about that kind of recently, or was I talking to you about it? It's all a blur. You're the only two people I talk to. But I was talking about how, you know, like through talking about things online, it's hard, but at the same time, it's like, because I'm putting myself out there then, like with me specifically, it's like I'm putting my problems out there. So then I'm putting that on the table for people to criticize me for.
Right.
But at the same time, it's like, I wish that I had heard people talking about like depression in the way that I had it, so that I could have realized that like way sooner and gotten help for it like so long ago, rather than like spending a ton of my adult life so far, you know, not being as productive as I could have been, not being as social as I could have been, not doing as many hobbies as I want to, like all of that kind of stuff. And so it's like, does the feeling of how shitty it feels to have people criticize you for being open outweigh the thought that you could be like helping a lot of people by just sharing? Like, you're not going out to these people's houses. You're not doing outreach. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're just talking, and people are listening, and that's enough to kind of like make change for people. So I just, gosh, I just don't know.
It's just so hard. And I think that we try really hard to come to terms with like what we're going to talk about beforehand, so that it doesn't hurt essentially. Yeah. But I think that there are things that I'm going to say should, but like there are things that should be sacred for people if they feel like they need to be.
Yeah.
And I think that if we ever avoid like a topic or something like that, it's purposeful. It's purposeful. Yeah. We're not doing it because we didn't think to be transparent or authentic or something. It's the same reason that I don't really talk about my relationships like in depth, and even the ones that like I'm in now or whatever, like, because I think that there are things that you have to hold for yourself. And I've seen, because I've watched YouTube for a very long time, and I've seen a lot of people be extremely open, and in like as couples or just as like singular people, and I've watched them kind of, it's incredible to watch their journey, because you can see them kind of starting to like regret what they've done and like the amount that they've let people in, and it's broken people up a lot of the time. And especially with like daily vloggers, like couple daily vloggers and stuff like that, it's a lot on people. And I think that it is really hard as somebody from the outside to not recognize that, because I was on the outside of it not too long ago. Yeah. And I wanted all the nitty gritty. Like, I wanted to know.
Oh, for sure.
Of course, we're curious as humans. Of course we are. We always want to know. But I think what's interesting is that social media has brought us almost like this availability for everyone to be somewhat of a celebrity. Whether it's like a micro influencer, or what do they call you folk? Like mega influencer.
You folk
over there with your millions.
Someone actually tweeted a like breakdown of like what like a micro, macro, mega, like whatever kind of thing, and people were like, oh god, I'm not even micro anymore. Like
micro's like 100,000 now?
I think it is.
Oh yeah. Jesus Christ.
Yeah,
I'm down there in the amoeba. I'm an amoeba influencer. But where I was like, oh yeah. So it's just no generation has had to kind of like navigate through this, because with traditional celebrities in like commercial, like having commercial success, like actors and singers and stuff like that, artists, they kind of had like all this, and I'm not saying it's easier, because I'm not one, I don't know, but they have like a huge team, and there's more so like written code and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think it's so different because they are I think that they are still quite curated, like their image is still curated, whereas with influencers, I mean, a lot of influencers do try to curate their own image, and some people have managers that are more hands-on, especially like the big ones. But, you know, there's a lot of people that are just, they are making their own brand, whereas like Beyonce's not doing that, okay? Yeah. Like, you know, there's people creating what Beyonce is going to be to the media, and what she's going to talk like, and what she's going to act like, and whatever. And of course she has her own thoughts and feelings, which she probably implements into that branding, but at the same time, it's very purposeful, it's very intentional. It's not, I don't feel like it's quite the same.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that people kind of expect, I don't know if they expect that, I don't know, but they expect more from the influencer community.
What do you want from me?
Yeah, basically. Because you would never expect a celebrity, well, I don't know, maybe you do, but I would never, I'm like going back and forth.
What do you want?
You want the public. But I would never expect a celebrity to like come out and talk about their, like, I'm not expecting Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt to be like, it was really hard to have sex after our kids.
But I wish a bitch would. I'd love to hear it.
But that's the thing, and it's almost like because I don't want to, I'm struggling to not come off like ungrateful, but like because someone is following us because they've chosen to subscribe to us or whatever, it's almost like they're deserving of of us in the entirety. And I know that you kind of have spoken about that a couple of times as well, but I still am allowed to have secrets.
Well, and I also think that you're allowed to stop sharing whenever you want. Like you can share about your relationship, and then you can be like, no, I'm not going to share about my relationship anymore, and then I can start again, and then I can stop again. Like I don't think that it has to be like written in stone, like, well, you showed your relationship, so now we deserve to know, which I have had people say to me, like after I've gone through breakups and stuff like that, people saying that they deserve to know because they were there through it. And I'm like, you were not sitting there through my relationship, ma'am. I'm like, trust me, like you fucking wish. No, you don't. But I mean, yeah, it's hard dealing with that. To me, it almost feels like it becomes kind of like a responsibility in a way, especially when it comes to conversations surrounding mental health, which sometimes it's all I want to talk about. Other times it's like the furthest thing I want to talk about. But I do feel almost like this responsibility because I have so many people kind of responding to me, messaging me about it, asking me how I'm feeling and stuff like that. And I feel like, well, I don't feel like I can just stop commenting on that because it's like I'm now in these people's minds. To me, this is my story.
Right.
You know, I'm this like advocate to these people, and like I'm this person that's talking and sharing and being open and whatever. So it's like, it's hard to then kind of reel it back in and be like, no, like I'm embarrassed today about it. Like I don't want to talk about it this week or whatever. And I'm struggling more, and I'm not willing to be open, because there's times I'm all over the fucking map, you know what I mean? And I think everybody is like that when it comes to sharing things. There's some times where you're going to call your friend about it, and there's other times where you're like, I don't even want to like tell people that this is going on. But I'm curious, like, how your perception around like sharing has changed from, being like in kind of more of the position of like somebody following somebody else to now being kind of more in like an influencer, having a platform. How has your perception of that changed?
Well, like I said before, I wanted all of the information. I never felt like I was like deserving,
like entitled to
it. Exactly. I didn't feel entitled to it, but I can definitely understand. Like there are a couple like YouTuber breakups that I wanted to know everything. Truly. And Miley Cyrus and Liam Hemsworth, I'm so fucking glad she spoke out about that. Okay. Because I was like dying to know. And in that she did say that she, I'm paraphrasing, but like that she was living her life in the public eye, and that she basically like had an obligation to tell people. And I thought that was really cool, because like a lot of people don't feel that way. Like a lot of celebrities don't feel that way. But I also think that like it's fine to not. It's fine to say like we're dealing with this like privately sort of thing. Anyway, now I feel like I just understand better. Because before I was like, but you did live your life online, and like now you're just not going to tell us about your breakup. And it's like, but you told us about all of this stuff, or like whatever it might be, when people are like, oh, I'm having this health problem, and then they just like stop talking about it. And I'm like, well, what happened? Yeah. But now I understand it more, because it's like you said, like I'm embarrassed about it today. There are days where it's like, well, I don't want to. Like there's been a change in something, or, my feelings around it have changed. And now I just don't feel comfortable talking about it anymore. And so I just feel like I'm more empathetic towards the fact that like these are human beings. Yeah. They're like living a life just like me. And I think that people, have this misconception that like money and like a number, like subscriber count or something like that, makes you somehow impenetrable. Yeah. And it doesn't. And I'm not like a millionaire or anything. Like I don't got like money coming out of my ears, but
yet.
yeah. This time next year. But
let's segue to our sponsors.
Yeah. But I don't think it doesn't add an extra shield. It doesn't give you armor all of a sudden. Yeah. And I just feel like more, empathetic towards that.
I'm curious if you think that, that there, because you kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but I want to like delve into it. If you think there's things that like just like point blank should not be shared, and like why?
I actually don't feel that way. I think that if you want to, not you, but like,
Sam, go for it,
girl.
You go, girl.
Yeah. I think that if you're comfortable and it's coming from like a good place for you, I think fucking why not? I used to love watching Lacey Green. She did Sex Plus.
Oh, fuck yeah. She was so great.
Dude, she had unreal content, and she was like qualified, and she was like educating. And when I was watching her, it was when I needed that education. Yeah. And she was talking about stuff that was like, to me, highly stigmatized, like herpes and stuff like that.
Shaving your freaking bikini line.
Yeah. And it's just like, regardless of if that's something you're ever going to deal with, it's nice to have the information. It's nice to... And not only that, but to also reduce the stigma around stuff like that. I just think that it's really cool and important if it's like comfortable for you. So no, I actually don't think that there's anything you have to keep private. The things that I would keep private is anything that like like betrays somebody else's like privacy, basically, because like I've said before, like I'm consenting to being on the internet. Those people aren't necessarily doing that. Yeah. And so I don't want to ever make somebody else's life more uncomfortable. And if I ever do talk about people on the podcast and like certain situations, I've already texted them ahead of time to be like, yo, is this okay? Yeah. Basically. Unless it's something like me drinking all of Glenn's beer, in which case I just let that one.
Just had to break it to him over the podcast.
But no, I don't know. I mean, like Trisha Paytas is one that comes to mind for me for sure, that is what I would classify as an oversharer. But I actually really appreciate that. I don't know. And I know you don't feel the same, but I think that it's pretty liberating for me to see somebody else just honestly being like, I mean, she's out there.
Yeah,
she's out there. And same with like people like Tana Mojo and like those. I feel like those are like the quintessential, like those are the out there oversharer like YouTubers. Yeah. And I couldn't do that, and I don't know that it's always healthy the way that they're oversharing.
I wouldn't say so.
Yeah, but it still is there, and it's still available. Like when I was hungover back in the day, I used to watch that Trisha Paytas hangover video. Okay, I would never post that shit. That's pretty freaking. That's a lot.
Yeah,
that's an overshare, but it helped me. Okay.
Yeah.
What about you?
Well, yeah, like when you're talking about Lacey Green and stuff like that, the thing that I think is like the coolest about people sharing online, especially when it comes to topics like that, is that it's a really comfortable way for people to learn. And I think that because it's so comfortable, it's not something where, like, it can be really traumatizing for people to ask about certain subjects. You know, so if you were having to go to like an adult or like your parent or whatever, like to ask them something that like you're kind of embarrassed to ask about, it's almost like from the jump now that has continued to be stigmatized because you feel embarrassed even asking about it. And then you feel embarrassed like sitting there talking through it kind of thing, or you're too scared to ask. And so I think that people sharing online, you can watch them anonymously. You're getting the information yourself. Like you can, you know, continue to learn. You can choose to put it down, whatever kind of thing. And so I think that because you can kind of, you know, sit with that content on your own, it does feel less stigmatized, and it does feel more like, okay, like I understand this now. I get it. This isn't like a bad thing. This isn't whatever. And I think that can be really helpful, especially because there are so many people in this world that they do look down on a lot of things. They look down on people that have sex casually or sex before marriage or, you know, whatever, people that have STDs, people that, you know, like anything, like all of these things that are so heavily stigmatized. You know, there are people that look down on that. So it's hard to kind of like go through life not knowing who you can trust, but you can always kind of like trust yourself to like learn about that privately and feel more comfortable with it. So I think that that's like such a beneficial thing for like our society in general. But speaking of Trisha Paytas and Tana, I'm because you said like you don't think that that's like them sharing in the healthiest way, and I'm wondering like what deems something now that it's like now unhealthy at this time, where was I going with that? Oh no, I was looking at a bird outside. What deems it unhealthy? Oh, do I have it written down? Oh no, I don't. Right. Okay. So what deems it unhealthy? And do you think that people share more often out of like just genuine wanting to share, or because of like things like views and stuff like that?
For me, I think that in order for it to be a healthy way to share, if you're giving like that much of yourself, you have to be in like a sober, clear headspace. And I can't speak to these people because I don't know them. I'm not their doctor, but obviously there are concerns that certain people on the internet are not necessarily always sober. And I think that it's super easy, because I used to do it when I was drinking all the time. I would post to my Instagram and stuff like that. Not recently, obviously, or like whatever, but back in the day when I was like partying like crazy. And I like sometimes that would be an overshare that I wasn't comfortable with, and then you wake up and you regret it. I just wonder, when you're that like massive on YouTube, like you have that much of a followership and stuff like that, you can't really wake up and just delete that video. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, it's kind of like
the damage is done. It's like,
yeah, and people have already saved it and they're going to reshare it and stuff like that. And that's kind of where I sit with that, where it's like, did you really want to post this? Or were you in a clear headspace? You know, that kind of thing. Like, did you like do the work within yourself before you gave this to somebody else? And then with Tana specifically, the only reason, and again, this is just like my opinion and people can disagree with me or whatever, but she's quite young. And so And she's very successful in like how she's branded herself and stuff like that. So do I think that she's going to be fine? Yeah, for sure. But I watch people like Shannon Rose, who I'm pretty sure has actually said that she regrets doing porn. I can't remember now, but I know that she's very like Shannon Rose now is like very open and stuff like that. But she said she was very young because she got into it like really, really young as well. And it's really hard to come back from that sort of thing, especially once you've like blown up in such a like magnitude like Tana Mojo has.
Yeah.
That if she ever did want to change her branding or whatever, you know, and you don't have to be like a white picket fence mom either. That's fine. But I feel like that's just the easiest place for people's minds to go is like when you're going to be a mom. So when she becomes a mom, she might just genuinely feel differently. She might not want to share all that stuff anymore and stuff like that. And then her audience is going to be like, well, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Because that is what happens. Because if you do, and I saw it with Shannon Rose. Shannon Rose changed her content from gross things I did in porn, like weirdest porn stories, stuff like that. And she went to like mommy more so vlogging, and her viewership dropped like crazy. So it's like we have that like evidence basically.
Yeah.
And that's just one example. But you know, if you do want to make that switch, that's inevitably what's going to happen. And so I just feel like she's so young, not that she's like that much younger than me, but she's 21 and she started when she was like, what, in high school?
Yeah.
That's a long time. That's your like formative years. Mm-hmm. And so it is just concerning a little bit to me to be like, you know, are you ever going to regret this?
Yeah.
Sort of thing. And that is why I waited a really long time to share things online, I think. Is because I wanted to be this person before I started doing it.
Yeah, and I can say like that because like I started when I was like 20, I think, like doing it full time. And I regret that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and at the time I felt like I like knew what was going on and I like knew who I was and all that kind of stuff. I fucking hate when people that are 26 say this shit, but it's so true. It's like, it honestly is like you hit 25 and you're like, oh fuck,
so I didn't know anything.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
and realizing that you still don't know anything, but you at least have the clarity of being like, I'm learning now, like now I understand that I'm still in like a learning phase. And so I think that you know, I regret a lot of how I behaved online and like in my industry and stuff like that because I was younger. And not that it's, you know, like I could use that as an excuse, but I think the difference is that I still do things that I regret. I still do things that I wish I had done differently, but I'm able to it's a lot easier for me now to be like, oh, yeah, that was wrong. I shouldn't have done that, whatever kind of thing. I get it. Like, but when I was younger, I was so much more defiant and I wanted to be right kind of thing that I would just continue to like dig myself into a hole because I was mad. I was like upset that people would use things that I had said against me because I didn't feel like it was fair. And I think that that's one of the things that I feel sad for a lot of influencers. And I felt sad for myself about the fact that, like, you know, people in life, they make mistakes, they say things they don't mean, they do things they don't mean, they do things they regret, whatever kind of thing. And they really do get to move on in most cases. Mm-hmm. But a lot of influencers don't. Like, that thing, even if it's been apologized for, even if it's been whatever, and sometimes it's for good reason that people are continuing to hold them accountable, but it's like they do not get to move on in the same way that, you know, people around you in your daily life do. So I think that it's, again, like, it's such a delicate balance because people are demanding transparency. They want to know what's going on. They want to be part of the journey. They want to know what's happening behind the scenes with brands and all that kind of shit. But it's like, you don't get, like, I think, like, that's the thing that's so hard, especially when you're a younger influencer. You don't understand how concrete that really is. And and like you said about people, even if you delete a video, it doesn't matter. Somebody saved it and they're re-uploading it and whatever. And, like, I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's right. I would fucking never. But I understand why it happens.
Yeah.
And I think you're being naive if you honestly believe that people won't do that. But that's why, you know, I do like YouTube live sometimes and I always delete it after. And people get really upset about it and they're like, why don't you keep it up? Why don't you keep it up? Like, I'm in Europe. And the reason I don't is because I want people to be there and listening to the conversation in context. I don't like the idea of me leaving that live up and extending the amount of time that people can go watch that, take a sound bite from that, and apply it to something completely fucking different.
Right.
Because I do try to be intentional about how I talk. And even though, like, you know, we sit here and we're like very open.
Yeah.
And we do talk a lot about things that are sensitive to us and things that are generally private for people, like therapy and mental health and relationships and all that kind of stuff. But I do try to be really intentional about how I go about that. And I know you're the same. And so to me, it's like, how disrespectful for you to decide to like warp my words kind of thing. So I think that, yes, you're responsible for what you put out there, but I don't agree that you're responsible for how people shape that.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
And I was going to ask you, I have it written down, hold on.
You got a lot of questions, man.
I know.
Wow, you came prepared.
I know. Yeah, I was going to ask you if you feel it's like that you deserve criticism. Like, is it fair to say that you deserve criticism if you put yourself out there?
It's hard because you like come to expect it. So I don't know that deserve is the word that I would use, but I think that you have to be
prepared.
Yeah, I think that it is the nature of it. And I came into this knowing full well what I was getting myself into, and I was prepared for that. And with all of the content that I might put out or that we might put out, I'm very mindful, and I know if something is possibly going to create a reaction that I'm not happy with, which is why I make sure that I'm like very concrete in my opinions before I post something. Because if somebody comes back at me, if it's true to me, that's all that matters to me. Unless it's something where it's like I was actually factually wrong, in which case then I'm like, yeah, of course I'll apologize for it and stuff like that. But I think in life in general, constructive criticism is positive. And I think that we have an opportunity to connect with so many people. And that's what I love about this space. Like, I don't consider myself an influencer because I just don't feel that way. But in this space, I get
Neither do I.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I wish. But I have so many people that message me every day, and they help me. They're offering to study with me. They're talking to me about alcohol use and stuff like that. And it's I feel like Instagram, YouTube, all of these social media platforms are really, really powerful. And there's a lot of opportunity for growth, but like personal growth.
Yeah.
When I used to bartend, I would take something away from so many guests. Like if I was having troubles, if somebody was like a lawyer or whatever, it's like now I have their undivided attention, and it's like free advice, even just people from like all walks of life or ages or whatever. And it's like, now I have that at home on my phone, and it's amazing. And so criticism, I don't know, but feedback, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that, I would agree with that. Like, I don't know that I'll ever feel like it's fair. I don't agree that just because you put yourself out there that you deserve hatred. I think that like criticism, feedback, obviously, yes, of course, but like I don't think that you deserve to be like picked apart, bullied, like all that kind of shit. I just don't agree. Because, and not that I'm naive to the fact that it's going to happen anyways. I'm never going to say that that's right.
No, yeah.
Or like justified because you put yourself out there. But I think that for me, through criticism that at the time, of course, I wasn't happy about, I've learned a lot from that, because I do have people that are willing to teach me and, help me understand better things that I don't understand or can't understand or whatever. And, when it comes to sensitive topics like race issues and cultural appropriation and stuff like that, I just don't think I would have the understanding that I have now if it wasn't for the community around me. And I am really grateful for that, because as much as like it was a little bit more uncomfortable than me being able to go Google it by myself, it still was somebody that ultimately was like, hey, I don't agree with what you just said or did, but like I want to like tell you so that next time like just in case, like that you weren't aware or whatever kind of thing. Because I think that one concern of mine when it comes to like sharing on the internet is that people act as if ignorance is like a chosen path.
Right.
And oftentimes it's not. Like a lot of people just are ignorant because they actually just don't know.
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, we've seen a lot, and people had been asking us recently too to do a podcast about cancel culture and stuff like that. And I think the thing that's so difficult when it comes to conversations around that is that a lot of the time when people are being like canceled, so to speak, it is for reasons that are warranted and reasons that are understandable as to why people would be upset. But at the same time, it's just such a sticky situation, because I do think there are a lot of people who genuinely, they actually just didn't know better.
Yeah.
And they weren't aware, and they don't get it, and whatever kind of thing. Because all the time I'll be saying things and people are like, oh, like actually the history behind that phrase or that term is, you know, racist or misogynistic or whatever kind of thing. And it's things that I would never, ever think that of. Like one thing was, like I said, rule of thumb the other day, and someone was like, oh, that actually has like really like misogynistic background to it.
Really?
Yeah, apparently, because it's something to do with like that you were allowed to beat your wife as long as it was with something that wasn't like wider than the width of your thumb, or something like that. And I was like, oh, but like stuff like that,
wild.
I would never in a million years think that that was offensive. You know what I mean? But it's just interesting to have people be able to like teach you the things that they know. But yeah, I do think it's hard, because I think that people assume that ignorance is, you know, that's their choice.
One, and honestly, a lot of people don't understand the definition of ignorance, because ignorance isn't arrogance.
Yeah.
It's just not being privy, not knowing, you know? And I agree. I think that I feel so lucky that I'm living in this time.
Yeah.
Because there's people older than me who are finally like grasping history, you know, and being like respectful of it. Our generation is kind of like leading that, I would say. And then the younger generation is now growing up, hopefully in most, you know, areas. They're learning that way instead of the way that our parents.
They're growing up that way rather than having to unlearn.
Yeah.
Like kind of how we grew up, and then start to learn like how to, you know, behave and think differently and speak differently as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. My next question. Okay, so I'm curious if you think that employers should be able to hold you accountable for social posts. And I think you'll have good insight on this, because you worked at a casual fine dining restaurant for 8 years.
So here's the thing. It is also a sticky situation, because it felt like being held captive is a little bit dramatic, but that is kind of how it felt, because you have to be so careful of the content you're putting out there, not even as like an influencer, just as like a general employee, because it could reflect badly on the company. And what I think is, if you are not devoted to that company, like, you know, say you are just like, not that anybody is like less important, but say this is not like your career path. This is not what you want to do. You don't care that much. It's just like a means to an end. That company generally won't care about you really that much, because you're not going to try to lend to their bottom line in any like big way.
Yeah.
And to me, why do you have to care that much then? You know, you go in, you do your job well, and then you leave, and that's still your life. You know, I just feel like when employers take that much power from you, they're taking away your like freedom, basically, to be who you are.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things now that you wouldn't even think are like that people like that employers would be pissed about.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of how I feel about it, is that it's like you aren't constantly an employee. You know what I mean? You're an employee for the hours that you're at work. And so like that doesn't mean that you're no longer affiliated with that company in some respect, but I really don't think it's fair or reasonable for employers to hold you accountable for things like even like not talking about competitors. I think that's bullshit. We don't all eat at the exact same restaurant. We don't all use one makeup product or one skincare brand or whatever. Like, give me a fucking break. Like, are we stupid? No, we're not. Like, and I don't think that anybody in their right mind, like if I worked for Mac and I posted about Benefit, I don't think people would be like, so you don't like Mac?
Yeah.
You know, like it's like, give me a break. So I know there's a lot of employers that have that stipulation that you're not allowed to talk about competitors on social media. I think that's bullshit. And yeah, I don't think that they have rights to determine what you are and aren't allowed to do outside of work hours. I think that if you contractually have agreed to not talk about that company online, like not talk poorly about them or whatever, that's understandable to me. If someone was to be dismissed for something that's otherwise like illegal, that's understandable to me. Sure. But I think that like you just having an opinion, you posting photos wearing what you want to wear, you know, you posting about you drinking or whatever, like I don't think any of that is fair.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, all of those people sitting in the boardroom deciding you're going to be let go for the same shit, fucking go home and drink and have sex with their wives and do whatever the fuck they want. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like, so why is that? I just, I don't know.
I understand if you're in a position where your position, like you have to have the respect of your employees.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me, because if I went out and saw like my like director of operations or something like that, you know what I mean, I'd be like, I would probably like think a little differently of them. So to me, I think that your involvement with the company
should be dependent.
Yeah, should be dependent on like how much you curate your social presence. And when I was a manager, I did curate my social presence. I completely changed my like lifestyle, and I think that that's why I became a manager, was because I had already started doing that. But yeah, I feel liberated now being able to talk about all of this stuff, and even like my anxiety and my drinking and stuff like that. Like, I think that if I wasn't, how do I say this? I think that it was more so like I started to put those restrictions on myself because I saw other people doing it as well.
Well, and you probably felt some amount of, you know, like responsibility in that regard too, that was like maybe self kind of.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that companies can be really good at kind of like creating that culture without having to say it out loud too.
Yeah.
But I think that we are like in the freaking age of like self-expression, and I don't know.
Yeah. I think that what you said about like depending on your involvement in the company, that's like how curated your social should be, because that's, I do agree with that. I think that for you to expect minimum wage employees to fucking like act as if this is like their heart and soul and they live, like eat, sleep, and breathe your company, give me a fucking break.
Exactly.
Then pay them properly, then give them healthcare. You know what I mean? Like, then we'll talk. But like, I just don't think that that's fair for you to pay someone like the absolute like bare minimum and then expect them to act like a fucking CEO.
Yeah.
And I do think that, you know, like CEOs, and I'm just making sure it's still recording. I do think that, you know, like CEOs and people that are higher up in companies do have like a responsibility to conduct themselves differently, which lends to my next question. So when it comes to like things like that with jobs and stuff like that, like how do you say as a company what's fair and appropriate and what's not?
I think that, I mean, it's hard for me to say because I've only really worked at one company for like a long time. I think that as a good practice, like a best practice, what people say is like, don't post something you wouldn't want your grandma to see. You know what I mean? So it's like, or like your mom or like whatever. And depending on like who your family is, it's obviously different. But what is appropriate? I don't know. Basically fucking nothing then. You know, like now my grandma's a lot more privy to my life and stuff like that. But, you know, back then it was probably just like me taking a hike and stuff like that. And I think that certain companies are more concerned with their image than other companies, and they probably will outline that, right? Like, and I think that they'll deem what's appropriate on like a like one-to-one basis or whatever. But yeah, I think it's interesting for me to think about like politicians and how curated and
Or not curated.
Well, yeah, okay, that's true. But anyway, for the most part, how curated and stuff like that, they would have to be to get to where they want to be. And like you were saying, the minimum wage employee and stuff, say I was, this is where I started as a busser. Say I was a busser and I wanted to be a bar manager. Well, then I would start acting like a bar manager.
Yeah.
And seeing what they post and, the kinds of things that they talk about and do on the weekends. And if they are going, I wonder if this is where I'm having a revelation.
Okay.
I'm wondering if this is where my like drinking in private came from, because I didn't want to be seen out drinking. Oh my goodness. Wild. But I'm just realizing that now, because back in the day, I literally would not care. I would go out and drink, be seen or whatever. And then once you start to worry about what your image looks like, then you just, I was still the same person, but I had to be that same person, but like in private, I guess. Yeah. Then anyway, that's interesting. But
bring that up next time in therapy.
But that's what I would say. They always say like dress for the
job that you want,
not the job you have. And so I think that for social media, especially,
post for the job you want, not the job you have. Yeah. People are like posting in like business suits, like
yeah,
new briefcase.
Yeah,
it's really hard for me to. Okay, I am very against establishment. I don't love a rule. I'll be honest. And I've spent the majority of my adult life working for myself, making my own decisions. So I'm a little biased in one direction. I understand the necessity of having guidelines and restrictions for companies and stuff like that. And I think there's things that are reasonable. Like if you're doing illegal shit and posting about it, if you're talking poorly about that brand, well, fucking obviously, you know what I mean? But I do think that otherwise it should be something that's kind of like self-dictated. Like you get to decide what's appropriate and like use your best judgment kind of thing. And that's what I would expect. Like if I had employees, that's what I would expect of them. Because I just don't think it's fair to say what is and isn't appropriate, because your set of morals and your set of beliefs and how you were raised and all of that kind of stuff can be very different from somebody else, and that doesn't mean that either of you are wrong. So I think that for you to say that like for instance, it's not appropriate for you to talk about sex kind of thing. Like let's say that you and I were working like normal office jobs, fucking kill me. Let's say that you and I were working like normal like corporate jobs, and we still had the podcast. I would be upset if my like employer had something to say about like me talking about relationships or whatever kind of thing, because I don't deem that inappropriate.
Right.
So, I'm not, to me, I'm like, I'm talking about it in an appropriate fashion. I'm not being explicit. I'm not being like over the top about it, in my opinion. So I do think that should be kind of, decided by each individual person. But obviously that can get sticky very fast. Yeah, I just don't know.
What an interesting picture you just painted by saying that, because I wonder if there are people who are struggling with that online but also working like traditional jobs.
I think that there's a lot of struggle when it comes to that, and I've seen influencers juggle that, like work full-time jobs and stuff like that, and it is hard because like if you're in any kind of position, if people know where you work, a lot of people are really scared about that. Like I've seen an influencer get blackmailed because she worked in the cosmetic industry, or the beauty industry, I should say, and she would post reviews about makeup companies and hair companies and whatever, and a company saw this review that she posted that was like particularly scathing. Like it wasn't like defamatory, but it was not a positive review in any capacity, but they like blackmailed her. And they went to her company and they were like, like trying to like talk down about her and get her fired and all this kind of stuff. And to me, I don't feel like that's right, because if her employer is comfortable with her posting that, obviously they know what's going on. You know what I mean? Like her channel was no secret. I don't know. Like I don't think that that's fair, because I think that that's like up to the company to decide. And if they said that was no longer appropriate, I'm kind of going off on like a sideways tangent here, but yeah, I do think it would be hard to like balance that, because people want to share and they want to be part of the community and stuff like that. But I think there are a lot of people that are scared to even comment things online because people will fucking trace it down.
Yeah.
Which is like just shitty.
Yeah.
So going back to people like Tana Mojo and stuff, Mojo?
Mongu.
Do you feel like from oversharing we kind of like forfeit our right to privacy?
I don't think that, because if I thought that, then I would think that that comment was correct.
Yeah. So just bringing it full circle. See how this all comes around?
Yeah, I'm a professional. No, because like we said, I think that there's certain days that you feel really comfortable sharing, and then certain days that you don't, and certain aspects of your life that you are willing to let the public in on, and then other aspects that you want to hold private. It's the same, you're open about your mental health and your depression and stuff like that, but you weren't open to sharing your wedding as much online. It's like that was for me, that's sacred, but I'll give you this. It's like it's up to us what we feel we want to share.
Yeah.
And I don't think that just because we share about one thing to to no avail, that we have to share everything to that same extent.
Yeah. I saw someone recently, another influencer, talking about something, and they were saying that they were like, oh, I don't want to get like too deep, but it was like still like very, very surface level conversation. And I was like, it's so interesting because like I think that there's people that like want more and more and more, and then there's people that are like so uncomfortable, like even like just barely skimming the surface because they feel like it's inappropriate or I don't know what where that comes from. But yeah, I feel like I have such a like skewed image of this now because I've been doing this for so long. It feels like forever. But I've been doing it for so long that I'm so used to sharing now that it almost feels like a burden to not share.
Yeah.
Like there's certain things that I like want to talk about just because I'm so used to talking about it. So I'm probably exactly who those people are making fun of.
No, I don't think they are making fun of you.
They might be. I'm pretty sure that actually was Joe Rogan that I'm thinking of a particular comment from him, which is bullshit because Joe Rogan gets on there and fucking runs his mouth.
About you?
No. Oh, God, no. Oh, my God, no.
I was like, Joe, we're coming for your podcast.
No. I think he was making a comment, and I could be completely misquoting him and like putting someone else's like quote to his name. I'm just not sure.
Okay.
But I think it was him that was talking about, talking about like female influencers, like saying that they like overshare and all this kind of shit. Which, I mean, it's just like you post a podcast every day. So would you not deem that oversharing? Like, I don't know. Yeah. I think that whole, I don't agree overall that like, I just don't think it's a bad thing, basically. I think there are people that do it in a bad way, like anything else. But I think that it's overall pretty positive.
Yeah.
And like you said, like as long as you're in a position where you're comfortable and you feel like ready to talk about those things. And I think that that's the biggest thing, for us about the podcast. There's some topics that like we might not have touched on now, and that doesn't mean that we're never going to touch on them. But right now, that's not what we're willing to put out there. And as much as like, we want to be touching on subjects that are important to you guys and that feel, like maybe more like dire to you, like you want to like hear about it and feel like part of something with that. It's just, it's hard to imagine actually being in that position, because I think we can all say what we would do or not do online, or like sharing to a large group of people, but it's so different. It's so different. And when you receive that first criticism, it's like, oh.
Oh, man. Oh. Well, that kind of hurts, doesn't it?
Well, and just what you see, when you see what people are willing to do, like twisting your words, like taking like portions of your video and applying it to things that aren't the same, like aren't in context. And, and the fact that you don't get the chance to ever take that away. It's there forever. Someone's documented it. You can be fucking guaranteed of that. Yeah, cover up your little toesies.
To keep getting free.
But, it's just, it's hard because people are mean and shitty. And so it's just like, you have to be, comfortable with what you're doing and saying. And, as much as we want to like help people feel comfortable and confident about certain topics, there's things that it's like, are we ready to have people pick that apart?
Yeah.
And, you know, message companies about it and stuff like that if they feel like it was inappropriate for us to share. And it's just, I don't know, it comes with a whole...
Yeah. Well, and that's what I want to say about the comment, because that's the thing. I'm not upset that somebody asked that we speak about sex at all, because we've actually been asked that quite a few times. And that's what I meant when we said when we don't speak about something, it's because we've intentionally not spoken about it. But what is hard is that, you know, we did share a lot in that episode, and we share a lot on this podcast, and it's almost like, because like we said, I'm human, I don't have extra armor just because, and it's almost like, and I know this wasn't the intention, but it's like, that's not enough. And that's telling me what you're doing is not enough for me. This wasn't good enough.
Well, and what you shared might have already been, like, not you specifically, but anyone.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
What you were sharing might have been, like, already really uncomfortable for you to share. Yeah. But I think that people are so used to people just, like, spilling the beans. And if they see you as somebody that's, like, very open, then I think they're like, well, why not?
Why not this?
The next thing, you know?
Well, and I will say, I'm always pushing myself to the limit on what I'm comfortable with. Like, here's me being uncomfortable. I'm right here. Dude, like, I'm not holding anything back that you know what I mean? Like, I'm not just like, oh, I'll just say this later. Like, I am holding back, but it's because it's up here. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, I'm really pushing to be as open and, like, authentic as I can be, which is why I don't even want to, like, touch on the subject of sex, because not even touch on, but, like, go in depth, because if we do, I want to do it justice, and I want to be able to be honest and open and really share experiences that I've had, and I don't feel comfortable doing that right now.
Well, and I do think that there's, like, a big difference in the impact of your content when it's something that you're still hurting with, or you're still carrying in, like, a negative way, versus something that you've already begun to heal on, or you have healed from, you know what I mean? Like, I think that there's a huge difference between that, because, like, if, like, for instance, let's just say, like, you know, like, if I was, like, in the midst of, like, drug addiction versus, like, I've been through rehab, I'm sober, I've been sober for a long time, right. Those are going to be two very different conversations, and not that one is more important than the other, but, you know, it's a lot easier for you to then be comfortable with that content being out online, because you have healed from it, and you have learned, and you have something to offer beyond just, like, hey, here's, like, my, like, raw, like, story that's, like, hurtful and upsetting and sensitive to me.
Right.
You know, because, like, there's just a lot of things in life that aren't easy for people. Yeah. And I think that it's I think that it's everybody's right to choose when they want to share and when they want to stop sharing and start and whatever. Yeah.
And with that said, we really do appreciate, like, the feedback and stuff like that you guys give us, and we do want to put out content that you guys want to see, obviously, and we are really grateful for everyone who is really kind to our hearts, because most of the feedback that I get and the interactions that I have with people are very warm and very accepting, and like, we're both grateful for the conversation, sort of thing. So I don't want it to sound like I'm like, you guys are mean.
Well, and I don't think that comment was ill-intentioned, like you mentioned. Like, I think it's just that, you know, it's people have things that they want to hear about, and they want to cope with themselves, and they want input on, because there's a lot of things that, even though we're in this age where everybody thinks we're oversharing, there's a lot of things that people still don't talk about. And, like, I've said this a million times, but, like, people don't talk about their relationships, and I completely fucking understand why. But for me, you know, I've never been in a relationship that was flawless. Like, we never fought, we never had issues, we never whatever, but I always felt like everybody else was in a flawless relationship except for me. And it's hard to live like that. Like, it's hard to think that you're the only problem, like, you're the only person that has problems in your life, and especially with something that's, like, as close to your heart as, like, a like, intimate relationship, and, you know, like, matters pertaining to sex and stuff like that, that is still so heavily stigmatized, and it's not talked about. So it's sort of like, you know, a lot of the times it feels like you're, like, the first person setting foot on that topic, which obviously you're not, but, like, to you, it's like, it's not that common to talk about this. Yeah. So it feels like you're venturing out into that category, like, alone, and that's fucking scary. Yeah. Like, it's not, you know, a lot of these topics, like, aren't as common as I think people think they might be.
Yeah.
But, I mean, that's it, guys.
Yeah.
Well, those are our thoughts on oversharing. We'd love to know what you guys think about it and what you guys have opinions about, what you think you would be willing to share online and what you wouldn't be willing to share online.
Yeah.
I'm interested what people think about the employers thing, especially if you work like a job that has specific rigid rules around it.
Yeah.
I want the nitty gritty.
So overshare with us. No. Thanks so much for listening, you guys. We'll see you next Wednesday.
Thanks, guys. Bye.